Cops of Reddit, what is the most suspicious thing you've ever caught somebody doing for a totally legitimate reason? Found a guy parked behind a middle school around 5:30 am on a weekday morning during the school's winter break, so no one should be there. He didn't have much of an excuse as to why he was there, but nothing else was out of place and he wasn't wanted. It wasn't until he drove away and I looked around where his car was parked and I found out what he was doing. He had taken a massive dump that was just sitting on top of the snow still steaming. Made me laugh so hard all I could do was kick snow over it and go 10-8. Available for calls. Oh man. I have vibes, and the worst is having an emergency when nothing is open. After the first couple of times I now carry stuff in the car to make a makeshift Maca shit. Not a cop, but I am reminded of a story. When he was 16 or so, my brother and his friends would do some absolutely stupid things. One day they were walking through the local grocery store and saw that cases of teenies, also called hugs, lil jugs, quarter waters, were on sale at a huge discount. They'd decided to have a teenies drinking contest, and bought several cases. So there they are in the parking lot of a stop-in shop. They have the cases stacked in the open trunk of a car and have formed into a circle, where they are now cheering the combatants on as two people at a time try to chug the most teenies in 2-minute matches. Kids two-fisting teeny jugs, breaking foil caps and pounding these juices and then crushing the plastic jugs on their foreheads and throwing them on the ground and going for the next juice. And during this idiocy a cop car pulls up. The cop gets out and sees a group of teenage boys crushing plastic jugs of something, screaming like idiots. Several kids have puked red purple colored liquid on the parking lot. He obviously thinks they have booze and starts giving them the riot act. At this point the officer is informed that the kids have no booze on them, that all they have are juice and that they were all overcome with thirst. The police officer eventually realized they are telling the, sort of, truth and ordered them all to clean up their mess and then head home. I'm the person that was doing something suspicious for a totally legit reason. Back in college, my female roommate and one of her female friends got in a rough patch and things boiled over at the local dive bar. They went outside to hash things out and I saw she left her purse behind. I paid both our tabs with my own money and brought her purse outside to give it to her. Well, I guess they made up and their way of celebrating was running through the street yelling at the top of their lungs. So I tried to catch up to them, without thinking how it looked. Two drunk girls running and screaming down the street while I, a drunk 6 feet 1 inches, 200 pounds bearded man, is chasing after them with a purse in hand. Not a cop, but the suspect. Had a bunch of people at my buddy Sauce's house in high school and we got bored. So we went to Walmart, bought some badminton equipment, and made our way to the park where Sauce and it. We had 3 cars and I was in the lead. So I pulled into the lot, and Sauce like 6 cop cars in this parking lot for some kind of sting. IDK. Me being a dumb high schooler, I wanted GFO and slowly reversed back out of the park. It looked suspicious as shit, so one of the cops followed me and pulled me over saying I didn't signal a turn, which was bullshit. BC, I was being followed by a cop, so obviously a sod used it, and asked to look through my car. I said yes. BC, we didn't have anything on us at all, and lo and behold, he finds a bunch of badminton shit. So I guess it was odd for him. BC, even though it wasn't illegal. It must have been weird to find 8 teenagers going to play badminton at 1 am. I was the only one on the block that didn't come out of the house after a neighbor was shot with an AK-47 at about 4:45 am. So my house was suspicious. The cops came over and banged on the door. They thought it was me. I slept through the whole thing. Took the cops quite a while to wake me up. I had no alibi. My roommate slept through it too. Kinda weird. TLDR. It was Brussels sprouts and X200B. I'm the guy who was doing something suspicious, but it kinda fits here. When I used to work at a grocery store, I would get off sometime between 10 PM and 12 AM. And I also preferred to ride my bike most of the year to save on gas. Since work was close to my house and there were few cars out, I never really bothered with lights. Already suspicious, I know. Right around Thanksgiving we would get in these massive stalks of Brussels sprouts. Which if you have never seen one, they look like something you might find growing on an alien planet. A solid 3-feet little bulbs at the end of spikes basically. They were super cheap, so I couldn't pass up such a deal. But of course the only way for me to transport it home at night was to ride with the stalk sticking a foot out of my backpack. I have no idea what the cops thought it was when they pulled me over. Marijuana? A weapon? They were doing their deal where one talks to me and the other checks me out from behind when the one behind me busted out laughing. Are those Brussels sprouts? Double quote. They let me go a minute later. Patrolling a military housing neighborhood. I had noticed a suspicious van parked around the area over the past few nights. Always in a different spot, but I could never catch it coming or going. So around the 5th night of this, I hide my car and wait. Sure enough, the van rolls through. I waited a few minutes before following. Turn the corner and light up 3 guys rummaging through all the trash cans left on the street. Turns out, they were part of Sid, Think and Sis, the show. But Army version. They suspected someone in the area was cooking meth. And were going through that garbage cans to find discarded ingredients. I only found this out after getting chewed out after they called my supervisors. I still don't feel bad. No one told me. Actual cop here too. Nothing major. But one night I come across a pickup truck parked behind a small business. Backed up to the dumpster. Guys next to the truck emptying out trash from the bed of the truck and throwing it into the dumpster. Figured it was someone illegally dumping their crap in someone else's dumpster to avoid having to go to the landfill. Make contact with a guy who says he owns the business and that he is renovating his home. But ran out of room in his dumpster there. He comes back listed as the contact key holder for the business and the truck he was driving was registered to the business. So it was all good. Not exciting. I know. Recently I was conducting a RS-18 house search on a guy we'd arrested in a local club with loads of drugs on him. In his room I found an oversized, out of place, vase with false flowers in them. Suspicion raised. I take the flowers out and in the bottom I saw what I believed to be a balaclava. Here we go. I took it out, unfolded it, and it turned out to be a jumper for a small dog. I look in the vase again. I see a blue velvet drawstring bag. I manipulate it slightly and it rustles, with the feeling of lots of little packets inside. I remove it slowly. Open the bag and inside are some retro Scrabble pieces. Da fuck. We didn't find any further drugs in his room. We did however find a big fuck off sized machete under his mattress wrapped up in a tea towel. So that was interesting. Still confused AF about the contents of that vase though. The first one that comes to mind for me. Late at night. Saw a dude hauling copper pipe out of a local grocery store after it closed down. Copper theft at the time was super common. So I thought I had a burglary in progress. I stop out. Get ready for an easy arrest. Ask him what he's doing. He says he was hired to clean the place out. Ask why he's taking the copper. Owner told him that his payment was the copper piping. Since it wasn't going to be a grocery store after. They didn't need it. I didn't buy it for a minute. Bullshit detector was screaming at this point. So I find the owner in our records. Call him. And sure as shit. Dude was hired to clean the place out and was paid in copper pipe. That was their agreement. But then I asked him why he was out at 2 AM. Since it was super suspicious. Since the place closed down. There was no AC. As it was the middle of summer. 2 AM was the best way to do it and keep cool. Son of a cop. My dad told me about a time. Back in the 80s. My father was sitting in his cruiser. Around the corner from a bar. A car drives by swerving a little with exhaust coming for the tailpipe. Signifying a recently started vehicle. Pulls the guy over. Smells alcohol on the driver. While also noticing a large staff in the back seat. He has the driver step out. Then inquires about the staff. The driver tells my dad I'm a black belt in Kung Fu. I use it in class. So my father, unconvinced, asked him to demonstrate his proficiency with the staff, whilst proving his sobriety in a sort of impromptu Field sobriety test. The driver puts on a little show for dad on the side of the road. Dad's enjoying the show, but starts to hear sirens coming from all directions. A passerby had seen my dad on the side of the road in a face-off with a crazy man and a stick. Thinking my dad was in need of help, the passerby called the cops. Apparently, my dad had been so wrapped up in the show, he had not heard the radio calls for him. So dispatch sent all available units to his rescue. Passerby thought my dad was getting ass kicked by ninja. 3 AM on a weeknight and I pull up behind a car at a light. The light is green and the car is stopped but running. Foot was on the brake. Light turns red so I wait behind him. Light turns green again and this dude isn't stop moving. So my partner and I quietly exit our vehicle and approach his. He was completely passed out. Asleep. With the car in drive. We woke him up and talked to him to make sure he wasn't so drunk and he was just tired because his wife had a baby a few days ago and needed him to run to the store for something. That newborn sleep deprivation is real. My cousin is a cop and told us the story of seeing a car driving slowly at about 3 AM through a neighborhood that had had several break-ins. He thinks to himself that they're looking for a target. So he puts on his lights and pulls them over. He walks up and the driver puts the window down and she turns to look at him with fire in her eyes and says, in a harsh whisper, "This had better be important because I just got the baby to sleep." He looks in the back and there's a baby in a car seat. Sound asleep. The memory of what it was like when his babies wouldn't sleep rushes back. And he says, "Oh no. I'm so sorry. Never mind." And goes back to his car. She drives away slowly. He's just glad he didn't wake the baby. Prior US Coast Guard. We were doing a security boarding on a vessel planning on entering port with some hazardous cargo. Me and one other guy are in the engine room, making sure everything is kosher, when we catch a glimpse of some boots barely sticking out from under a piece of machinery. Since, as far as we knew, all crew were present and accounted for above deck, we were understandably concerned. We radio up asking about it. Get told all present and accounted for up above. So we're thinking stowaway or someone being smuggled. Luckily it was neither. Just a dude who legit fell asleep while doing some maintenance. He shared a name with one of the other crew. So that's how we missed his absence. Apparently they, our guy up above, checked the same guy twice. Go fig. At around 2 AM on a weeknight, I see a guy bolt from a house in a quiet residential burglary hotspot. His face is covered. He's wearing sunglasses or something similar and the kind of dark clothing you catch burglars in. As I follow him and start to shout up on the radio. The car's parked between us clear to reveal he is running on a lead behind the tiniest dog I've ever seen. A clearly uncontrollable pooch that is having the time of its life. I just kept going. Edit. Some clarification. The dog was on a lead. He was stopping to snuff at lampposts. It wasn't a dog napping. The man was running as he was trying to keep up with the dog while letting it go at the pace it wanted to. He ran from the house but the front door was closed. Dog lid took off when they hit the pavement. When I got a closer look the glasses were tinted. Not sunglasses. I don't know why he had his face covered. It was a scarf and it was autumn but we don't have sumptuary laws in our country and you can wear what you like. I'm not the fashion police. I spoke to him when I saw him later on but I don't remember the dog's name. Sorry. Further edit. It wasn't an expensive dog. It was a cheap dog. Cheap dogs have more fun I reckon. Not me but a friend of mine. We're in high school and my brother invites a bunch of his friends over to the house. These guys are kind of hyperactive and a lot of fun to be around. Anyway, en route to the house one of our friends gets lost. Up until about 2 years ago, most GPS systems had our address swapped with one down the street. So our buddy ends up at the wrong house. He's driving very slowly around the neighborhood in a very old black sedan from the 80s. Kinda like a Monte Carlo but not a sports car and way shittier. He calls us up saying he thinks he has the wrong place. We correct him. He finds our house and everything is square. Well 20 minutes later the doorbell rings. Our 3 friends, being silly, Dive to the floor with a cry of "It's the police. Get down." Our mother answers the door and lo and behold, it's actually the police. They are responding to a call about a suspicious vehicle by one of our neighbors. After explaining, the officer just left no harm done and we immediately starting laughing about the whole thing. Correctional officer here. 3 years ago I was working a high security high risk unit in the middle of the night. The control room came over the radio when I was doing my rounds in one of the 4 pods. Somebody popped out of their cell in B pod. Double quote. This led to myself and 3 other guys suiting up in extraction gear and getting ready for the worst. We rushed to B pod and get the inmate under control and cuffed. While we are doing so we observed smoke billowing out of the cell the inmate came from. Still have no clue how an unburnable cell caught fire, but it started inside the walls. Celebrated Midsummer last night and was the driver for my group of friends. Midsummer is a really big holiday in Sweden with a lot of alcohol being consumed. So naturally there are a lot of police working and a lot of DUI charges. I had just dropped 2 of my friends off and had just turned the car around when my mate pointed out the police car chilling at a pocket down the road. We did not think much of them as we did not do anything illegal. But once I got onto a bigger road I noticed red and blue lights in my mirror. Turns out that they saw me turn around and figured I was trying to run away from them. So I used to live in a pretty shit part of town in Georgia. One morning around 2-3. The dog is acting all crazy like he's got to get outside right now. I grab my shoes and the leash and take him out and down the block. It was a particularly quiet night for the area. Suddenly I realize there is a car creeping down the street with the lights off. I start to feel some anxiety because shootings are not uncommon in the area. I get the dog close and hang out by a tree, keeping it between me and the car. As the car starts to pass, I peek out and see Georgia's finest officer inside, playing solitaire on his unit's laptop. In the middle of the night. No lights on. While driving. I was really relieved. At first. Then pissed. Sorry for the Night Shyamalan twist there. Not a cop but funny story. For a while in HS, instead of rolling people's houses, we would bread them instead. Basically the local bread store would throw out all of the out-of-date bread. We would go by in a pickup truck and sometimes fill the bed over the cabs with bread. One night we did just that and made it all of about a 1-2 mile from the store. Before a cop car started following us. 2 of us in the cab and 2 others balancing in the back of the bed. Filled with about 500 loaves of bread. We turn right, the cop turns right. We turn left, the cop turns left. And then hits his lights. He walks up to the truck and sees that it is overflowing with bread. He asks the obvious question. "So what are you boys doing with all this bread?" Without missing a beat. My friend looks at him and smiles. "Suffice, we are going to feed the ducks." The cop laughs his ass off. Goes back to his car to determine if the bread has been stolen. Which of course it was not. He say, "I'm not sure what you boys are up to. But if you follow me to the nearest dumpster and then head home, I think we can call it a night." I'm the perp in this scenario. So I'm not the best person at looking after their keys. I've broken into every house I live in at least twice. One particular flat happened to be next door to the local police station on a busy road. I get home from work about 11 PM and once again realize that I don't have my keys. As I'm a kitchen porter, my uniform is entirely black. I decide to attempt the front window, as I know it's the easiest one to jimmy. So I pile up a few bins and work my way up to this precarious ledge. I hear a little cough behind me and half the station have piled out to watch my progress. This being England. The coppers are all sarcastic as hell and essentially tell me exactly what I'm actually doing, breaking into my own home, as if it's an obvious excuse that they don't believe. I then have to sit there waiting for the landlord, a family friend, to drive down in his jammies to confirm that I'm the legitimate tenant. After the confusion was cleared up, the cops cracked out a set of ladders to help me back in and said to call round to borrow them if it happens again. So that was the time the cops helped me break in. Still not the most risky break-in I had to do in my time. Friend sauce story. Not a cop. at the time, though he is now. He had a job as a horse-drawn carriage driver. He had the top hat, stupid coat, a twirly mustache, and a knife. The knife was because the horse pulling you and your fiancé through fucking downtown Chicago on a Saturday in summer is a retired Amish draft horse. All those ponies were old. And if you hit a pothole in the capital of such things, Pritzker, please use the weed money for the roads, okay thanks. You had to put also silver down right there. So, you can make fun of the uniform. But all those nerds LARPing as lesser cousins to landed gentry are carrying blades. Buddy comes off his shift and takes his pink bike to a DD. And chows down on that 3 AM egg sandwich. Cops come in. And both notice him. A takedown. Search of backpack and finding the knife. And walk through booking later. He finds himself in a cell. Not until the morning, when Thesaw giving him his shoes back, does he find out why the sleepover. A local DJ had been stabbed and killed at a nearby house party by a guy with a twirly mustache who rode away on a pink bike. Not a cop. But the guy stopped. I had a project for a forensic anthropology class. We had to study the decomposition of an animal. And the best way to do that is fresh roadkill, of course. So part of our assignment was to go find some fresh roadkill and scoop it up. Bring it home. And observe it. It's about 2 AM. I'm out with my girlfriend and we find this big, fresh, snapping turtle on a country road near a river. We pull over. We've got plastic bins lined with garbage bags. I'm putting on my gloves and getting the shovel and I make a joke about how funny it would be for a car to drive by and see this. Not a minute later, a car pulls up behind us and stops. Then the spotlight comes on. Yup. State trooper. Confused as hell as two college students are putting this fresh mess in a bin. I'm nervous, laughing. Super awkward. Trying to explain that this is for a school project and I'm not some weirdo. He starts laughing. Asks if I'm from college with Professor. I am. And it's for her class that I'm collecting the sad remains of a slow animal. Turns out, before becoming a state trooper, he had the same assignment. So he helped me scoop up the turtle and told me to tell the professor he said hello. TLDR. Cop pulls me over while I'm picking up roadkill for a school assignment. He had the same school assignment a few years before. I was sitting with another officer in a parking lot watching traffic in a shady area of town known for lots of drug activity at 10 PM. We were parked in the shadows. A car rolls into a nearby parking lot, followed shortly by another car. They are at the rear of the lot behind a business. Both guys exit their cars. And one guy has a paper bag in his hand. The two guys approach each other and I hear from across the parking lot, "I told you I'd come through. This shit is fresh as hell." Yo. My buddy and I roll up, hoping to have interrupted a crack sale. The two gentlemen appear horrified and consent to being searched. Inspection of the bag revealed 3 peaches that were, indeed, fresh as hell. Our shift supervisor stops at a light next to a naked guy on a motorcycle. The light turns green. The boss got behind him and hit the lights. The guy wouldn't stop. A pursuit was called and a few of us joined. He led us a mile or two outside of town. Pulled into a long driveway. Immediately gets prone and profusely apologizes. He's completely sober and terrified. He lost a bet and had to make the block on a bike while in the buff. He wasn't familiar with the area and found himself at a lonely stoplight with the only cop in that district. He wasn't completely sure where we stopped him. So we gave him directions and sent him on his way back to the party in a borrowed cop raincoat. Not a cop story, but I guess I was definitely suspicious. I had just moved into a new apartment and I had no tools. So I decided that during my lunch break I would go to Home Depot, buy a hammer, so I could finally hang some frames, and grab a quick lunch in the food court. HD is inside the mall. Long story short, my country had just gotten rid of plastic bags that week. So of course that's how I end up walking around a big crowded mall with a hammer in my hand and nothing else. It was a quick thing so I didn't bring a backpack, and before this point I never noticed the lack of packaging on hammers. Of course people start staring and someone tell one of the mall security guards about me. The guard stops me. I tell him the story, he lets me go. I go to the second floor. The same happens. I go to the third floor. And now a group of mall security guards start walking behind me but without making contact. By then I had lost the receipt, or another one of the guards kept it. Dunno. I knew they were gonna keep harassing me. So I decided to leave the mall and head back to work without lunch. An hour later I hear one of my co-workers telling the story that something had happened at the mall. Something about us lunatic walking around the mall with a hammer. TLTR. I walked around in a mall holding a hammer and security didn't believe me. I had just bought the damn thing. Mine is more a reverse situation. Off-duty police officer caught doing something sus by a civ. My boyfriend at the time had locked his keys in his car, so I texted my dad, now retired police officer, while I was at school to ask him how to get them out, thinking he'd give me the numbers of some local companies or something. He texts me back asking where the car was parked. So I assumed he was organizing the service on my then boyfriend's behalf because we were in school so couldn't make the calls ourselves. About 30 minutes go by. And one of our friends from school who had a free period that morning texts my then boyfriend to say he saw some big burly dude breaking into his car. But he didn't want to call the police because the dude caught a good look at him in the car he was driving and he was nervous he'd track him down or something. 10 minutes later we found out that that big burly dude happened to be my dad. When he texted me to say that he dropped my then boyfriend's car keys to the front office. He'd managed to find a thin, hard plastic rope type of thing in one of the bins near where the car was parked. Used it to slide between the window sill and yank up the door lock. Having to explain to my friends, word got out pretty fast that my then boyfriend's car was being broken into, that it was actually my dad breaking into the car. To help him get out the keys that he locked inside. Was one of the weirdest conversations I've ever had. But it gave my dad some pretty wild street cred. I guess mine isn't so bad. I was the suspect. Back in early 2000s. I bought a PSP on release day and loaded some MP3 files to it. Walking to work on a long stretch. I pulled my PSP to start some music and slipped it right back into my pocket. 15 minutes into my walk. LAPD swarmed me with guns pointed at me and asked me to get on the ground. I think I was 19 at the time. I got on the ground and one officer dug his knee into my back and asked me if I was carrying any weapons. I said no. He said that a lady had reported me with a weapon in hand. I paused for a moment and then said, UHH. I have a PSP in my pocket? Maybe she thought that was a gun? Double quote. The cop said nothing for like 5 seconds and went right into my pocket and pulled out my PSP. He asked me if I was dealing drugs and I said, what? No. Why? He had been scrolling on my machine, wondering what Metal Gear Acid was. Eventually they let me get up and explain that it was a PlayStation Portable. I just remembered them knocking themselves backwards laughing and driving away without apologizing for my aching back. I'm on the other side of this. I was picking my wife up from work late-ish one night when my daughter was a baby. I was driving around the parking lot because she would stay asleep as long as the car was moving. I was kinda early so I circled for a while. Long enough to attract the attention of someone that called the cops because someone was prowling the parking lot. Cop rolled in and stopped me. My daughter woke up and the cop had a good laugh when he found out what was going on. Not a cop. But feel this applies. When I was still in college, I had a bunch of friends over for a night of video games and Dungeons and Dragons. We bought a huge case of Mountain Dew, none of us were drinkers, and stayed up pretty late because of it. The house I lived in back then was real shitty. And our AC went out all the time. This was one such night. We had a table on our front porch. One of my roommates liked to collect free furniture from people sauce yards. So we decided to move our game to the front porch. We play for a few hours. And hear a voice call out from the driveway. We look over to see a police car had pulled in. The officer pulled his flashlight and started shining it at us. I wonder what went through his head when he saw a group of nerdy college kids with a fuck ton of empty Mountain Dew cans on the porch. Apparently, a neighbor had called the cops for a noise complaint. We didn't realize it was 4 AM. Moments later, the neighbor came out and told the officer that she had called about a different house. There was a satellite frat or something down the street. And the officer thought it was us. He gave a BS excuse about still being in violations and gave me a warning, as I was the only resident of the home, before taking off to reel with the actual party animals. I still like to tell people our D&D sessions are rowdy enough to get the police involved. This is from the other side. Not the cop sauce. But this is my favorite story about my grandpa. He worked in a factory. And often worked overtime. Meaning he would be going into work around 3 AM. This is rural Wisconsin. In farmland area. And the neighbors down the road happen to own llamas. So it's early morning. Still dark. And the neighbor's so fence broken the llamas got out. And my grandpa ends up hitting and killing one with his truck. Being the responsible citizen that he is, he calls it into the police. Now, the police hear a hit a llamas at 3 AM. And think my grandpa is some drunk coming home from the bar. Who hit a deer and doesn't know what he's talking about. The cop comes out fully expecting to arrest my grandpa and put him in a cell to sleep it off. Imagine his shock when he gets to the scene. And sees a dead llama on the side of the road. And a large llama fur covered dent in my sober grandpa's truck. In fact, he was so surprised. He got on his radio back to the station and says, "Holy shit you guys. He really did hit a llama." I still can't see a llama to this day without thinking of my now gone grandpa and smiling about this story. Not a cop, but was stopped by one. Junior year of college. Was taking a biology class. Where we had to do a phylum project. Go out and gather like 15 different organisms across 15 different phylum. This involved a lot of rooting through bushes for bugs and shit and throwing them in a big Ziploc bag. So, naturally I was rooting around in bushes on campus. Only problem. It was like 1 AM. I'm a night person. What can I say? So I'm out with a flashlight. Darting in and out of bushes. Hoisting around this big ol' Ziploc bag full of random unidentifiable shit. Car drives by just as I jump into a set of bushes to grab what looks like a type of cup fungus on a tree. Come back out to find a cop car stopped there. And a guy shining his flashlight on me. I apparently looked pretty suspicious lol. Literally my first words to the cop were wow. This probably looks really sketch. Doesn't it? Told him about my project. He laughed because he thought I was like smuggling a literal Ziploc gallon bag full of drugs or something dumb like that. Had a good laugh. Wished me good luck. And left me to my bush diving. That was a fun night. Not an officer, but I got a story. I had driven a customer home in her own car, a beautiful brand new BMW, because she was afraid to drive at night. I asked her if she had any family that could help and she said no. I told her to wait for my break and I'd ask another employee to follow us in my car so I could get home after. Well, driving towards her home I was pulled over by the police. I was asked to step out of the car and was escorted to the sidewalk. There were 4 cruisers within a minute all around us. I heard one of the officers asking her if she was okay and if I had hurt her. The officer questioning me asked why I was driving her home and how I planned to get back. I told him the story. Pointed to my friend who pulled over and said that's my car. He then asked why I was so nervous and I replied that I've never been approached by so many officers in such a way. Then I asked what was going on and he told me that her daughter reported her car stolen because she never stays out that late. When her daughter showed up she was unfriendly and didn't apologize or say thank you. Then her mother started yelling at her about how she treated her like a child. Apparently, she started showing signs of dementia but still drove to our place a couple of times a week. Didn't see her again after that night. She was such a sweet woman and I felt so bad it all ended like that. I got to go back to work and hope no one asked me to do something like that again.